Okay, let's unpack this.
Let's do it.
We're diving deep into something a little different for us today. I mean, usually our job is pretty straightforward, right?
Yeah.
We extract knowledge, we analyze the content of our sources.
It's about the what. What are the facts? What are the arguments?
Exactly. But today, our mission is a lot more intricate. We're looking at a raw, live conversation. It's a Twitter space from back in 2021.
And the topic was intense. Misinformation, disinformation, cybersecurity, all the big ones.
Sure. But here's the twist. A listener gave us a really unique assignment for this deep dive. They didn't just want us to analyze the content of the conversation.
No, they wanted us to analyze the people, the psychology of the individuals who were actually driving the discussion.
Which is fascinating because we actually have the tools to do that. We have the full transcript of this space, but we also have something else, something critical.
A detailed psychological profile for one of the main hosts, Alberto Daniel Hill.
And this profile is incredibly detailed. It lets us do something we rarely get to do. We can blend this digital conversation analysis with some really deep psychological insight.
It's like having two parallel tracks. On one, you have the conversation itself, hosted by Jennifer Alberto, and another speaker, Sinua.
And on the other track, you have Alberto Hill's cognitive abilities. We're talking an estimated IQ in the 130 to 140 range, his big five personality traits, and maybe most importantly,
The profound, life-altering impact of his past trauma. It lets us connect the dots, to understand the why behind his relentless advocacy in this whole cybersecurity space.
Yeah, you really get a feel for the dynamics from the very first moments of the space.
Yeah.
Jennifer, who's the main host, she immediately sets this tone of, I guess, high curiosity and intellectual humility.
Oh, absolutely. She goes out of her way to say, hey, this is my very first Twitter space.
Which is such a disarming move.
It really is. And she states explicitly that the hosts are there to learn. She even encourages the audience, she says, assume that we are ignorant on the topic.
That opening, that voluntary vulnerability, it's so key. It signals a really high degree of what psychologists call openness.
Which, you find out, aligns perfectly with Alberto's profile. They're creating an environment that's safe for a really high-stakes discussion.
By basically rejecting the idea that they're these infallible experts on a pedestal. They're building trust right from the jump.
Precisely. They're establishing a safe space to talk about what they pretty quickly start calling the information war.
And if you're going to fight a war, I guess the first thing you have to do is define the enemy.
Exactly.
So they jump straight into that groundwork, right? They start establishing the difference between these two terms that, let's be honest, most people just use interchangeably.
All the time. Misinformation, disinformation, it all gets lumped together.
But the first critical distinction comes from Sinua, and it's actually very clear.
It is. Sinua defines disinformation as purposeful. It's intentional deception.
So like propaganda.
Exactly like propaganda. It's a falsehood, and the person or the group spreading it knows it's false. They're doing it with a specific, often malicious, intent to achieve some kind of goal.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. What about the other?
The other side is misinformation. And Sinua clarifies this is the inadvertent spreading of those falsehoods.
So the person sharing it actually thinks it's true.
They genuinely believe, they're not trying to deceive anyone, they've been mistaken. They become a victim of that original disinformation campaign, even as they become a vector for spreading it.
They're a carrier, but they don't know they have the disease, so to speak.
That's a good way to put it. And then another speaker in the space, a guy named Eric Blardo, he adds this layer of nuance it's essential to understanding the whole life cycle of a lie.
What's that?
He explains that disinformation, the stuff that starts out purposeful and malicious, it often becomes misinformation when it's picked up and shared by someone who, in his words, doesn't think critically. So the falsehood gains this momentum, this unearned legitimacy, when it jumps from the malicious actor to the unwitting participant.
It's like a virus mutating. It starts in a lab, but then it spreads through the general population.
Right. And this is where we see Alberto's conversational style really come into focus. Because when he's asked to weigh in on the definitions, he uses this self-deprecating humor.
Which, again, we know from his psychological profile is a key strength for him. He uses it for critique and for managing stress.
He sure does. He just deadpans, we are disinformation about this topic, basically, when they ask him to help define it.
It's a joke, but it's not just a joke.
No, it's loaded. It's an instant move toward what you could call radical transparency. He's highlighting that even the so-called experts are fallible, and in doing that, he's subtly building this community trust.
He also grounds himself immediately in his real-world work, too. He's not just some guy talking on the internet. He mentions his organizational ties.
Yeah, he says he's an advocate for hacking is not a crime, and a volunteer with rossicyber.org.
So it's not just an introduction. It establishes his credibility and his seriousness.
Yeah.
It's a counterbalance to that sardonic humor.
And again, his profile backs this all up. This whole persona is driven by two of the big five personality traits.
Yeah.
High extroversion and high conscientiousness.
The high extroversion, I mean, that's obvious from the sheer scale of his public work. The profile notes he's hosted over 2,000 live Twitter spaces.
2060, to be
Yeah.
exact. The level of that kind of persistent public engagement is it's extraordinary.
And you pair that with his high conscientiousness, which his profile describes as relentless advocacy, and you get this picture of a super energetic, technically sharp, and very serious participant.
Who uses this huge platform he's built to educate. He builds that community trust through transparency, using his own vulnerability, even that self-deprecation, to kind of disarm his critics and forge these real connections.
So then the conversation, it pivots, and it pivots hard. They go from these, kind of intellectual definitions.
To the terrifying real-world impact of this information war. And Sinua introduces the core mechanism that makes all of this so effective.
The emotional weaponization of information.
Exactly. Sinua stresses that misinformation plays primarily at the emotional level.
Which is so critical. It's designed to bypass our logical brain, the prefrontal cortex, the part that does the critical thinking.
And go straight for the amygdala, straight for the fear, the anger, the immediate survival responses. It's a biological hack.
In the anecdote Sinua shares next, my gosh, it just drives home the lethal consequences of this better than any statistic ever could.
You're talking about the WhatsApp example from Mexico City.
Yeah. It's an unforgettable and just horrific story.
So Sinua describes this false message that was circulating on WhatsApp, which is important because it's an encrypted, trusted platform for many people.
Right. It feels safe, it feels private.
And this message warned local residents that there were child kidnappers operating in their area. It played directly on the deepest, most primal human fear, a threat to your children.
So the whole community is on high alert. They're terrified.
They're terrified. And then two men in a pickup truck are spotted. Just two random guys who had absolutely nothing to do with any kidnapping.
But the community, already emotionally inflamed by this digital warning,
Yeah.
they don't see two random guys.
No, they see the threat. The mob, in what Sinua describes as just going mad, they capture these two men, tie them up, and in this act of horrific vigilante justice, they burn them both alive.
Burn them alive.
Burn them alive.
It's a necessary but incredibly painful pause in the discussion. It shows that it took only one single digital message
One piece of disinformation preying on community fear.
to trigger immediate lethal physical violence. It terrifyingly illustrates just how thin the line is between a digital word and an irreversible physical consequence.
And the fact that the hosts didn't shy away from that brutal example shows you how serious they were about highlighting the stakes.
It forces you, as the listener, to confront the fact that this isn't some abstract academic debate. This is life and death.
And from there, they immediately start to generalize this weaponization. They connect it to global politics. And they note that politics is probably the best example of how misinformation is used so effectively.
Alberto highlights propaganda's function right there. He says it's delivered on purpose in order to get people to believe certain things that make those that generate that misinformation an advantage.
It's about power, securing political power, gaining influence.
And Sinua then provides the global context, which shows this clear pattern of these techniques just being adopted across borders from one leader to another.
They cite the Mexican president, who is described as using fake news daily in his public addresses. A technique, they argue, was directly adopted from the last U.S. administration.
They link this to a whole pattern of populist authoritarian figures. They bring up Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela, the late Hugo Chavez.
The pattern is explicit. Disinformation is this universal tool that's used to steer public discourse, to delegitimize your opponents, consolidate your own populist power.
And critically, to distract the public from any actual systemic failures.
And what's so fascinating there is the psychological insight. The goal isn't just to make people believe something false.
No, it's to compel them to act on that belief.
Exactly. Whether that action is casting a vote or rejecting established medical science or, tragically, participating in a mob attack,
Yeah.
The falsehood is engineered for a behavioral outcome.
So the conversation then, it naturally flows from that emotional core of misinformation to the technical systems, the machinery that automates and scales this manipulation.
We shift focus to the cyber aspect of this information war.
And this is where Alberto's technical expertise and his emotional history with systemic failure becomes intensely relevant.
And the central case study they dive into is, of course, Cambridge Analytica. It's the perfect nexus of data, algorithms, and manipulative intent.
Alberto describes this whole operation as a key example of artificial intelligence, of machine learning tools being used to, I love his phrasing here, grab user data from a social network that I hate.
That phrase says so much. That intense personal disdain for that unnamed social network.
Why do you even say its name?
He calls it evil. It's not just an intellectual disagreement for him. It's this deep, visceral rejection of systems that exploit and manipulate people. We have to kind of hold on to that emotional thread as we talk about the data.
Absolutely. And Eric Blardo, he's the one who details the staggering scale of the data operation. He reports that Cambridge Analytica was able to scrape an average of 5,000 to 6,000 data points.
Per person.
5,000 to 6,000 data points off of each person.
Let's just pause on that number for a second, because
Yeah.
for you listening, 6,000 data points, it sounds like a lot, but you might not grasp the sheer predictive power that represents.
Right, it's just an abstract number.
But Eric provides this crucial baseline. He notes that you only need about 230 data points for what's considered a significant psychological study.
230.
So you multiply that by a factor of 20 or 30, the depth of personal inference you can make becomes, well, it's staggering.
We are not just talking about what pages you've liked or your basic demographics.
Oh, no, not even close. We're talking about metadata. How long you pause on a specific photo, your scrolling speed, which can indicate nervousness or interest, micro emotions that could be detected through webcam access, your location history.
Mapping the entire structure of your friend networks.
6,000 points allows an AI to build a nearly perfect digital twin of your personality, your fears, your hopes, and your deepest vulnerabilities.
It's terrifying. And to make that predictive power tangible, not just abstract, Eric shares that chilling anecdote about the Target Corporation.
The Target story is a classic. Target analyzed purchasing data, just, things like changes in buying vitamins, unscented lotions, certain supplements.
Stuff you wouldn't even think about.
Not at all. And they used that data to accurately predict a woman's pregnancy status before she had told anyone.
And the story goes that a father got incredibly enraged when Target started mailing prenatal coupons to his unmarried teenage daughter.
He storms into the store, right, demanding an explanation for why they're sending his daughter pregnancy materials. He's furious.
But then a few days later, he comes back to apologize.
Because Target's analysis had been correct. The daughter was, in fact, pregnant. And this illustrates something profound about these tools. They don't just influence decisions you're already making.
They anticipate your life choices based on patterns you, the human subject, were not even consciously aware you were creating.
It's this profound erosion of personal autonomy. And that leads Alberto to raise the core philosophical and ethical question that really anchors his entire advocacy career.
He just puts it to the group. He asks, to what extent are our decisions actually being made by ourselves versus, quote, with the help of those tools?
And his answer is immediate, and it is absolute. He asserts very strongly that using these manipulative tools is unethical and should not be allowed.
Not just regulated, not just overseen, prohibited.
A complete prohibition on weaponizing AI and data against human free will.
This stance, this is absolutely the crux of our psychological analysis of him. His strong, principled, and frankly defiant ethical position, and his profound distrust of these large, opaque systems.
It's a direct manifestation of his key traumatic experiences and impacts.
Right. His profile documents this life-altering trauma of his wrongful imprisonment back in 2017.
He describes being betrayed by systems. He talks about enduring deep judicial ignorance, like prosecutors who struggled to grasp the basic concept of an IP address.
Imagine that. Your life is on the line, and the people deciding your fate don't understand the fundamental technology involved.
And he suffered this devastating loss of control, the seizure of his assets, including his Bitcoin. He felt the entire legal system, which is supposed to be a pillar of public trust, just failed him.
Because of technical illiteracy and institutional indifference.
So that experience, being crushed by a bureaucratic system that didn't understand technology, is the fuel for his advocacy today. His high conscientiousness is now channeled into relentlessly pursuing legal reform and promoting technological self-defense.
He is literally trying to fix the very systems that wronged him and left him with what he calls scars forever.
And his personality traits completely support this defiance. His agreeableness score is noted as moderate.
What does that mean, exactly?
It means he's cooperative when he needs to be, but he's fundamentally principled and more than willing to challenge authority when he sees an injustice. It perfectly encapsulates his I speak truth to power attitude.
So his position isn't just some intellectual point he's making.
Not at all. It's a trauma response that's been channeled into systemic reform.
And his intellectual horsepower, that high IQ, plays directly into the solutions he advocates for.
You see it so clearly. He can quickly shift from analyzing the ethical problem to engineering a technical solution. So when another speaker, Pello, asks this really challenging practical question.
How can we possibly de-Google or de-Facebook ourselves?
Right, how do you put the genie back in the bottle? The technical minds in the space immediately start grappling with just how hard it is to delete data once it's been globally distributed.
Eric suggests it requires a generational change and robust legal reforms. He even cites specific examples, like the GDPR in Europe and the CCPA in California.
Which are laws designed to empower you, the consumer. They grant you rights like demanding to see your data and the right to have it erased.
But Alberto, the man who experienced the legal system's failure firsthand, he counters immediately.
And he argues that laws are just papers, and that compliance can often be sidestepped or simply ignored, especially when you're dealing with these global tech giants.
This is the definitive moment. This is where his trauma directly informs his proposed solution.
He's basically saying, I cannot trust the bureaucracy that failed me to enforce these paper promises.
So what's the alternative?
Therefore, he concludes, technology itself. Things like strong encryption should be the primary tool used to enforce privacy and protect the individual.
He's solving the problem with code because the system failed him with paper.
It's such a fascinating and pragmatic split. He distrusts the legal promises, not because he's some kind of anti-law anarchist, but because he saw firsthand how easily judicial ignorance and systemic indifference can render those laws totally meaningless.
He believes the enforcement has to be baked right into the technology itself.
So, moving beyond those technical systems and the legal structures, the conversation then shifts to the core psychological puzzle.
Which is, why? Why do people willingly accept misinformation even when they're presented with easily verifiable objective facts?
And this leads them directly into the dynamics of tribalism and our own cognitive vulnerabilities.
Eric kicks it off by highlighting how these platforms, driven by engagement algorithms, naturally function as echo chambers.
Right. They cater to our innate human tribalism. They continuously reinforce similar mindsets, and, as he puts it, they actively block the ability to expand your horizon.
It's comfort over truth.
And Pete, another speaker, immediately agrees with that. He emphasizes that this is just human nature, we're hardwired for this, we crave positive reinforcement.
And that reinforcement comes from the approval of the tribe, the community that shares our beliefs.
And then Sinua introduces this really crucial concept of the belief engine.
Who believe in it.
Yeah. And the argument is that the platform is only half the problem. We are essentially our own echo chambers. The belief engine is the psychological apparatus inside us that dictates whether we accept or reject new information.
So what's the mechanism at play there?
It's cognitive dissonance. When we encounter facts or views that fundamentally conflict with our deeply held identity or the beliefs of our tribe, cognitive dissonance kicks in.
It's that uncomfortable feeling you get.
It's mentally painful to accept the conflicting information, so our psychological filter just automatically rejects it, often by labeling the source as biased or corrupt or just fake.
It's not necessarily a lack of intelligence, then. It's a form of psychological self-preservation.
That's it exactly. It is so much easier to reject a fact than it is to dismantle a belief that forms the foundation of your identity and your social circle.
And the participants then tie this internal mechanism to a much broader societal hunger. A speaker named Mr. Ney cites Joseph Campbell's landmark work, A Hero of a Thousand Faces.
Which is a brilliant connection to make. He argues that people today are hungry and desperate to believe in something because modern Western society, for the most part, lacks a unifying shared cultural myth or structure.
That is a profoundly resonant insight.
Yeah.
Without those shared narratives that provide meaning and context for our lives, people will seek out alternative sources of intrigue, structure, and hope.
And Mr. Nay connects the rise of movements like QAnon or flat earthers or other extreme conspiracy theories directly to this desperate search for meaning.
Because these movements, no matter how factually incorrect they offer something incredibly powerful.
A grand, coherent narrative. They provide an explanation for a bewildering time. They assign agency. There are good guys and bad guys. And they give the participant a special, unique role.
The role of the enlightened few who know the real truth.
Right, and that immediately counteracts the monotony of daily life. It offers you intrigue and a sense of belonging, which are incredibly powerful psychological rewards.
And the heartbreaking difficulty of trying to counter these powerful, emotionally driven beliefs with simple facts is brought home by these devastating personal anecdotes.
A speaker named Colleen mentions her struggle with a family member who is deeply invested in what she calls QAnon crap. And she notes that presenting science or evidence or even alternative news sources,
It just immediately turns into an argument.
because the argument isn't about the facts. The argument is a threat to that person's identity and their community standing within their chosen tribe.
And Eric shares an even more painful story. He describes his sister-in-law becoming so lost in her echo chamber that she essentially abandoned the rest of the family.
He said he tried every tactic: psychological persuasion, emotional appeals, hard facts.
But nothing worked.
Yeah.
She chose her new beliefs and her new tribe over her long-standing family ties. And that anecdote,
Yeah.
it illustrates the depth of that tribal wall.
It's not a casual disagreement, it's an ideological and social divorce. To those trapped inside the chamber, any contradictory evidence, no matter how verifiable it is just dismissed.
It's all fake news generated by the enemy.
And this realization that facts alone are insufficient. It forces the speakers to conclude that the only viable defense mechanism is to strengthen the recipient of the information.
You can't stop the flood, so you have to teach people how to swim.
That's it. The solution is proactive education and critical thinking.
Jennifer, Eric, Alberto. They all quickly agree that teaching critical thinking is vital, and you have to start early, with future generations.
They discuss the advocacy efforts they're already involved in. They highlight Rise's Cyber and the upcoming Rise's Kids Foundation.
And this foundation is specifically designed to teach cybersecurity awareness and critical thinking skills to middle and high schoolers.
They're recognizing that this digital landscape is the new reality. And to survive in it, you need mental resilience and analytical skills.
And this dedication to structural change in education, this perfectly embodies Alberto Hill's ongoing journey of what psychologists call post-traumatic growth.
Right. We're seeing him take the profound injury and injustice of his past and channel it into this clear, purpose-driven life.
His profile emphasizes that he views his experience of injustice as leaving scars forever. But those stars have been transformed into this dedication to advocacy.
He's leveraging his high conscientiousness, that determination and relentless work ethic, and his high IQ to advocate for the very systems he felt betrayed by.
It's this defiant optimist mindset. The profile notes that his bio proudly states he changed the justice system in Latin America petitioning for reforms.
He reframes his own hardship as a necessary precursor to progress. It aligns perfectly with the psychological concept that trauma, when it's processed correctly, can foster purpose and wisdom.
He is the living example of turning betrayal into betterment.
And his commitment to radical transparency, openly discussing his personal vulnerabilities like his experiences with PTSD and depression after his imprisonment, that serves a dual purpose.
How so?
Well, on one hand, it's a coping mechanism for him, but strategically, it humanizes him and it counters all those common hacker stereotypes, which fosters this incredibly high level of trust with the huge community he engages with through those thousands of spaces he hosts.
Right. So as the discussion starts to wind down, the hosts tackle how the very vocabulary around truth has shifted. And this leads to a discussion of emerging threats and necessary ethical boundaries.
They clarify the semantic evolution of the term fake news, and the consensus in the room is that it quickly became this convenient catch-all.
A fashion way of saying misinformation.
Exactly. And critically, the term was adopted not because it was precise, but because it was simple and it was easily weaponized.
It was a rhetorical tool of dismissal. You didn't have to engage with the facts or the argument. You just labeled anything you disagreed with as fake news.
It simplified the attack and it solidified the tribal boundaries.
And looking ahead, Eric raises the major emerging threat that he believes will fundamentally destabilize all forms of verifiable evidence.
Deepfakes.
He acknowledges that at the time, in 2021, deepfakes were still, in his words, easily identifiable if you knew what to look for.
Subtle glitches, strange lighting, inconsistent blinking patterns in the eyes.
So he immediately warns that the technology is advancing exponentially,
And the critical turning point will be when that technology improves to the point that photorealistic video evidence is completely indistinguishable from reality.
which will just profoundly affect trust in everything: institutions, law enforcement, political discourse. If you can no longer trust your own eyes and ears, what common reality are you building your decisions on?
This threat demands more than just better technology. It demands ethical and legal consensus. Eric touches on technological countermeasures. He mentions steganography.
Which is the practice of concealing a file or a message or an image inside another file, right? It acts as a kind of tamper-proof watermark.
Right. So the idea is that future media files won't just contain the video or the audio, but they'll also contain these hidden cryptographic markers that certify their origin and prove they haven't been altered.
But as the hosts acknowledge, that requires industry buy-in and a global standard, which is
Far from guaranteed. And it also requires a legal consensus on what constitutes dangerous, non-protected speech. Where does satire end and malicious deception begin?
And that concern brings the conversation right back around to the issue of leadership and its role in normalizing distortion.
One speaker highlights that when political leaders, and they cite figures like Modi in India and the previous U.S. administration, when they encourage misinformation or promote alternative facts, it creates this destructive feedback loop.
They call it a bottom-up permission structure.
It's a great term. It gives the general public permission to also distrust truth and spread falsehoods. If the leaders aren't held to a standard of truth, that expectation just evaporates for the average citizen. It normalizes the distortion of reality for personal or political gain.
And Sinua offers this really compelling final synthesis on the three primary drivers for why people spread these falsehoods. It boils the motives down to their simplest psychological and economic roots.
The first reason is really straightforward: to earn money.
This includes selling miracle cures or books that validate conspiracies or just monetizing online clicks through outrageous headlines. It's a pure economic incentive.
The second is political influence or gain. This is the state actor trying to sway an election or the populist leader trying to consolidate power.
And the third reason, which is honestly kind of chilling, is often overlooked.
Simply because some people just want to watch the world burn.
Which points to this deeper societal nihilism, maybe even sociopathy, where the goal is just chaos. It's the breakdown of shared reality, and it's completely detached from any tangible political or economic gain.
It's disruption for disruption's sake.
And to close out this analysis of manipulation, Bugs, another speaker, he introduces this terrifyingly effective framework that's often used in online deception. He calls it the 5 count.
And this isn't random. It's a blueprint for incremental psychological manipulation.
Okay, let's break this down, because it's a tactic everyone should know how to spot.
The goal here is conviction, not information. And the technique starts by establishing the first 3 statements as verifiable, undisputed facts.
Simple facts, like the stock market went up today, the weather was sunny, a specific company reported record earnings.
Right, and you, the user, you think, yes, I agree with those 3 statements. Trust is established immediately. You're nodding along.
Then the manipulator slips in one subtle, non-obvious falsehood in the 4th statement. It's something that would require a moment of doubt or fact-checking that you are now psychologically primed to skip.
So, for instance, that company reported record earnings, which proves that the new regulatory body, which is secretly controlled by X group, is ineffective.
The falsehood being that parenthetical statement about the regulatory body's secret control.
Exactly. And then the 5th and final statement is used to seal the conviction. It often ties it back to that emotional core or your tribal identity.
Something like, therefore, we must all share this information now, before they try to take it down.
Right. By leveraging the verified nature of the first 3 points, your critical guard is dropped for the 4th, and the 5th statement provides the immediate behavioral call to action. It's calculated manipulation that leverages psychological momentum.
It's a powerful reminder that this information war isn't just random noise.
Not at all. It is highly calculated and designed to leverage our most human vulnerabilities, our tribalism, our emotional sensitivity, and our cognitive shortcuts.
So at the end of all this, what does it all mean? We've taken this really comprehensive deep dive, not just into the technical mechanics of disinformation and misinformation,
but into the profound psychological and emotional landscape that makes us so vulnerable to it and what drives the dedicated few who fight back.
And the conversation confirms that combating misinformation requires this multi-layered defense. It demands technical fixes, like strong encryption enforced by code, not just trusting paper laws.
It requires necessary legal reforms like GDPR and CCPA, but above all, it requires psychological defense mechanisms that we have to build through intentional education and critical thinking.
And the analysis of Alberto Daniel Hill's participation really provided a clear human anchor for that whole fight. His journey illustrates the extraordinary power of post-traumatic resilience.
The profound scars that were left by that systemic betrayal and injustice, they didn't cause him to withdraw from the world.
No, they were channeled through his high IQ and that relentless conscientiousness into this extraordinary, purpose-driven advocacy for truth and technological protection.
It really is the ultimate example of transforming a personal injury into a public purpose, all driven by this defiant optimism against these incredibly powerful systems.
But the most critical challenge, I think, remains what Sinua concluded the original space with.
Which is the very survival of democracy itself, our collective ability to tackle existential issues like pandemics or climate change or global conflict.
Because ultimately, if we allow the tactics of misinformation to completely erode our capacity for a shared reality, if we can't even agree that critical issues are real, or what the basic, verifiable facts are, what necessary, unified, and urgent action are we failing to take today?
That's the profound challenge that lingers.